It's here, the Surface Pro X. The future is in our hands, but are we ready for that future? Hello, my name is Brad, and if you're new here, I review tech for creative professionals, and that means people who are designing and illustrating, so oftentimes my reviews are a little light on the specs that you might be able to read off the back of the box, but are pretty heavy on the user experience, specifically the user experience for people who are creating things. I review a lot of stuff like this: Windows tablets, iPads, drawing tablets, things like that. Over on my site, brad.site, you can check out the archive of my reviews. I list out some of my favorite stuff over there. Also, a lot of those links are affiliate links to Amazon. That's how I support the channel here. So if you've ever clicked on one of those before buying anything, I want to say thank you. So, on to the review. First things first, the Surface Pro X is a beautiful machine. It is super thin. It's lost many of the little bumps and vents that the old version had. And it comes with this matte black that looks so cool once you wipe the fingerprints on it. They shrank down the bezel, so it's got this nice shiny screen. Then of course there's the hinge. It's as great as ever. It holds up really well. It has two, count them, two USB-C ports, a magnetic port for charging. You can even swap out the storage really easily. Look how small that drive is. The design of the Surface Pro X is something to behold. It's so beautiful, I hired a choir to come and sing about it. Thanks guys, I'm good. Don't need any more singing.
I wanna sing.
Me too. Yeah, okay. There's also a redesigned keyboard cover and a redesigned slim pen.
It fits in the hole.
These two things don't come standard with the Pro X. You can get them bundled together for about $269. But the biggest change, and the one that's gonna have the largest impact on how you use this tablet computer, is what is under the hood. They have switched from using Intel chips over to using ARM chips. This may not sound like a big deal, but it is. Windows apps have to be reworked or recompiled to work with these new ARM chips. Because of this, not every app that you may want to use is going to work with the Surface Pro X. Gaming is pretty much completely out. Most games just flat out will not run. So why is Microsoft doing this? Well, let's go to the storyboard. ARM chips are what you find in phones and tablets, and they run with a lot less power, and that means less drag on battery performance and less heat generated, meaning less need for airflow in and out of your computer. They aren't as powerful as Intel chips, so tasks like video editing or gaming, Intel is still the way to go, but for a lot of common everyday computing tasks, ARM processors work just fine. About 3 years ago, Microsoft said, "Hey software makers, Windows now supports ARM," and software makers were like, "Cool, bro.
I like your tie."
And Microsoft was like, "So are you gonna support it?" And they were like, "Sure, yeah, I guess."
We know that means no.
That transition has moved pretty slow. Only a couple computer makers have used ARM chips in their laptops because not all software is ready. And software makers haven't made ARM support a priority because there aren't many computers that need it.
Chicken or egg.
So here comes the Surface Pro X. Nothing says, "Hey software makers, time for you to take this more seriously," than Microsoft taking their brand new flagship tablet computer and making it ARM only. If they split it two ways, ARM and Intel, no one would buy the ARM and they'd be back where they started from. So for the Pro X, Microsoft is all in on this ARM chip. Now this isn't Microsoft's first stab at trying this, but it is definitely one of their more serious initiatives. Microsoft's probably hoping that this will prompt a lot of the software makers who have ARM support on their to-do list to make it more of a priority.
Adobe.
Guys, we're not naming names here.
Are bad. I didn't know.
Microsoft is using the Surface Pro X to make a statement about the future of Windows. There will probably still be plenty of uses for more powerful Intel chips for the foreseeable future, but the Pro X is paving the way for a class of devices and form factors that can run Windows into the future. End of story time. But this brings up the big question: what will work on the Surface Pro X? Some apps are native to ARM, like Microsoft's apps. Those are fast and snappy. Many others, though, are being run through emulation. And for some of those apps, they are noticeably slower and occasionally throw up a weird error message or two while you're using them. Now, I can't possibly test everything under the sun, but here's a brief rundown of some of the art apps I've been using and what is working well for me and what just isn't. So first and foremost, we have Photoshop on here. Woo! And as you can see, I've been using Photoshop throughout this video. Photoshop Photoshop works surprisingly well. At least when you're drawing, it works pretty well. A lot of times where I start to notice the quirks is when I start to play with the fonts or when I start to scroll or zoom, it seems kind of chunky. I should also point out that this is running Photoshop 2018. It's not Photoshop 2020. So this is an emulated version of Photoshop. Now, Adobe says they are in the process of recompiling many of their apps to run on the ARM chip. So I'm curious to see how that's going to be. I'm going to be definitely hanging on to the Surface Pro X over the next year or so just to see how it performs once they get that stuff up and running, if they get that up and running. Now, I pulled open my Creative Cloud here to show you what you can run. You can run Photoshop CC, you can run Illustrator, InDesign, Bridge, Dreamweaver, InCopy, whatever that is. All sorts of stuff. The one thing, well, there's actually multiple things that you're going to see missing here. One, you're not going to get any Premiere Pro. You're not going to get any After Effects. And the thing that I really, truly missed that I was really hoping would be ready for launch is the new Adobe Fresco. It doesn't have everything yet, but I really love the way it works on touchscreens. I love how intuitive it is, and I love the potential of that app. I was really hoping it'd be ready to go, especially since they showcased Fresco for the Surface Pro X at the Surface Pro X event. So hopefully Adobe gets that out soon. But as of right now, you just can't download it. The other app I was really excited about was Clip Studio. This, I think, works better than Photoshop. You know, if you're looking for like a really deep drawing and illustration program that works pretty well, right now, I think Clip Studio is definitely my favorite out of the bunch that I've tested here. Next up, I'm going to load up Krita here. It takes its good old time to load up. That's something that I definitely noticed with a lot of these emulated programs. They're just not as fast as they are on the Surface Pro 7, but once you get drawing, most of them are okay. Krita, there we go, is not okay. The brushes just aren't smooth and they're not performing the way I expect them to. This is an older brush I use. Let me try a different pen here to show you what I'm talking about. You know, that is not what that brush is supposed to look like. This might be one of those things that if I dive in and I go into the settings and I play with the pressure sensitivity, I might be able to get that fixed. Maybe there are some drivers out there. But out of the box, this is probably going to take some more customization than you might be willing to put into it. Next up, we have Medibang. Medibang is working very well. I was surprised at how well this thing works. Medibang is also free, so if you're looking for a free app to use on something like this, this is a good one to check out. Zooming is a little chunky here and there. Some of the interface things are a little off. But for the most part, if you're just looking for something that you could draw and sketch in, Medibang's not a bad choice. Next, we have one of my personal favorites. This is Sketchable. Sketchable is available in the Windows Store. And I don't know if this is running natively on ARM or anything like that, but it's super responsive, and I love the way this is performing. Out of all of the apps I tested, this is the one I give my thumbs up to in terms of like performance and just running on the Surface Pro X. I don't know if it's running native or not. If it's not running native, it's still running extremely well. 2 thumbs up to Sketchable here. Now that I've gotten the good news programs out of the way, it's time to play around with some of the bad news programs. The other one that I really like on touchscreens that it's available for Windows is Leonardo. Leonardo is a 64-bit program. 64-bit programs aren't emulated here on Windows, so unfortunately this one isn't going to run. The other one that I tried was Affinity Designer. Affinity Designer is another one of those 64-bit apps. Affinity Designer, unfortunately, is a thumbs down for right now. The last one is Autodesk Sketchbook. It's not running on here yet either. Went to the Windows Store, tried to download it, wasn't able to. So maybe that'll be updated in the future, but for now, there's some decent options out there, but it's a little slimmer pickings than what you're getting on, say, the Surface Pro 6 or Surface Pro 7. The other big question here is this new slim pen. Is it better than some of the other pens Microsoft has been using on the Surface line over the last couple years? This is the first major redesign of the Surface Pen in quite a while. The pen also has a rechargeable battery in it now, and you get the fancy new keyboard cover. It will recharge while it's being stowed away. The good news here is that the only thing that's really changed about the pen is the appearance. The bad news here is the only thing that's really changed about the pen is its appearance. It's still using Microsoft's pen protocol, formerly called N-Trig. Now, MPP has its pluses and it has its minuses. Good palm recognition, so if you're doing handwriting, that sort of thing, it's great. But if you're doing art and illustration, you need really good ink lines, like a lot of my work that I do. I still get a fair amount of waviness to the lines.
Let's see a pen test.
All right, let's do it. So the first thing I do whenever I start a pen test is I like to just play with the pressure a little bit, see what happens as I apply more of it or a little bit less of it. And one thing about Microsoft's pens I've always noticed is that if you draw very, very, very lightly, it doesn't have a super great initial activation rate. It's better than it used to be, but it's not as good as what you might find on, say, a Wacom pen. And overall, the pressure's fine. The pressure's always been fine. You know, fast lines are consistent. It's not dropping any lines. It's not giving any weird fishhooks or anything strange, anything like that. The one thing that has always worried me about these pens is just the slow angled lines. As I draw, I get a fair amount of wave and jitter on these lines. And it's not so much the slow angled lines that get me, it's how fast you have to start moving before it knocks out a lot of that wave. You know, moving at a normal speed, I'm still picking up that wave. Oftentimes with other tablets which have a battery, the faster you move, the more you can knock out that wave. But I have to start moving pretty darn fast with my lines before I start to get them to be really straight. Now, a lot of folks will say, hey, but your hand naturally wobbles as you draw, and you're absolutely right, which is why I like to get a straight edge of some kind in here just so I can show the uniformity of that wave while I'm drawing. You know, and that's something you can tell with your hand. Your hand is going to be kind of all over the place, whereas when you're drawing and the tablet is making that wave, it's a very universal wave. The other thing I want to talk about here is the pen tip itself. It's not as small and narrow as it used to be on the older Surface pens. It's a wider pen tip, which I like. The pen itself is considerably lighter, however. That might not be to everybody's liking, but I didn't seem to mind. Even the irregular shape was fine for me to hold for long periods of time. The nice thing about Surface devices is that the older pens are going to work on these new machines, and the new pen is going to work on the older machines. That means not much has really changed from the tech standpoint, and it also means you're going to get pretty much the same results using a different pen. So just snagging a different pen isn't going to help you. Let me sync up the Bamboo and we'll test that as well. Here is the Wacom Bamboo pen. Is this going to perform any differently? Let's take a look. I think the pressure feels different, but for the most part, I'm still getting that shake to it. It's the MPP, the Microsoft Pen Protocol, that is the issue, not the pen itself. On to the pros and cons. Obviously, the pros are, this is a really slick looking machine. This looks like the future. This is the way I want my Surface Pro to look. And if all you need are Windows apps, the Office app, their whiteboarding app, some of the newer apps they've created to work with the pen, this thing works great. The cons really come down to the ARM chip and the pen. What kind of artwork you're going to be doing with that pen. I should also point out it does remove some of the things we're used to seeing in the older versions of the Surface. For example, the headphone jack and the SD card slot. But the big thing here is obviously that ARM chip. I think Microsoft feels like this is something they need to do right now, but for art and design, this isn't the right machine. At least not right now. The Surface Pro X is the future. It's not the present. I have a really hard time recommending this device right now in its current state to creative professionals. This feels like something a year or two down the road I can get behind, and I think it's going to be a great platform, but it's not there yet. It's really better to stick with something like, say, the Surface Pro 7, maybe even an iPad, other Windows tablets, things that already have a great ecosystem built up around them. So what do you think? Let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.